This is another instructional video by thecourtstore.com. You'll find all of our videos under DIY videos at our store at thecourtstore.com. This video will teach you how to patch a tennis court. We'll show you how to inspect and mark the patches, strike them off, sand and scrape the patches, apply a skim coat of color over them, and then scrape and blow the surface area before you apply your first coat of color. To inspect and mark the patches, you'll first need to flood the court or catch it right after a good hard rain. Then allow the court surface to dry for 1 hour. At this point, the standing water will be apparent. If the standing water even comes close to covering a nickel, the spot should be patched. A yellow carpenter's crayon works best for marking the perimeter of your patches. Our young professional actually bends over as he walks around the puddle with his crayon. I like to tape the crayon to the end of a pole. It just saves a lot of backache. Mark all of your puddles and imperfections with the crayon and then let the court dry thoroughly before you begin patching. After you blow all of the debris off of the court, you're ready to begin making your patch mix. Only mix the amount of super patch you will be able to use within 20 minutes. It has a fairly short pot life. Notice the paddle he's using. That is the right paddle to use for making this mix. It's pretty aggressive, but it also doesn't splash the mix all over your feet. Super Patch is a blend of very fine sand, sifted Portland cement, mixed with the acrylic polymer instead of water. The ratio is approximately 3 parts cement and sand to 4 parts cement and sand, mixing that with 1 part acrylic polymer. You can always add more acrylic or more sand and cement depending on whether you need to get the mix thicker or you'd like it a little looser. But the right blend will give you a consistency of what I like to use. I use the analogy of a thick milkshake, and you'll notice as he lifts the paddle out of the pail, you will see what I'm talking about. When your mix is ready, pour a bit out at one end of the patch. Now this is a fairly small patch, so he'll pour some out at one end, move his bucket out of the way, and then he's going to strike this off with a 36-inch squeegee. Your straight edge should always be a little longer than the patch is wide. A general rule of thumb is 1 foot longer than the widest part of your patch. Now, if your patch looks perfect after one pass, hey, that's great, but that's unusual. You'll usually have to go over it 2 or 3 times before you get the texture you want on the surface and have it spread out properly. You should always have a garden hose out on the court with you. You'll notice he's going to spray around the edges of the patch, and sometimes they'll even spray over the patch if he needs to strike it off again. But in this case, He just needs to feather around the edge. This allows the patch mix to blend nicely as he trims around the edge with the squeegee. And what he's trying to do is feather those edges into the quartz surface. Again, you're thinking drywall. A drywall patch, you want it to blend very nicely with the surrounding drywall. So he's feathering with this squeegee to take that kind of a sharp edge off so that it feathers into the quartz surface. A flat, smooth trowel can also be used. I know a lot of guys who like to use trowels rather than the squeegee. It's very important to do as much work feathering these patches in and getting them smooth as you can while they're still wet. It's much more difficult to sand and scrape after they're dry. This next clip shows our professional using a larger straight edge. Now you'll notice he's pouring across one end of the patch and then he'll pour down the middle. He knows that he's going to use a lot more patch mix in the center where it's deepest. So he'll put that in there so that the patch will fill in properly. This is actually just an aluminum straight edge that's fastened to his squeegee with two big alligator clamps. Now he'll strike off the patch as far as the mix will take him. You'll notice he angles the straight edge one way and then another. What he's trying to do is move that mix around on the straight edge to get it where he needs it. And at this point he'll put down the straight edge and move around that big blob you see. He'll try to move it over so that he can pull the patch a bit farther with the mix he has on the quart. After he strikes it off again, he's going to run out. So he'll have to put the straight edge again off to the side or out of the way and then pour a little more mix out to finish off the patch. And now he's misting. This helps smooth out the patch. Just a light mist of water over the patch and even around it, as we talked about earlier. And then it'll be one more pass with the straight edge. Here he demonstrates how to feather the edges of a patch with a flat trowel. After your patches have dried overnight, it's time to smooth them out, to feather them in so they'll blend with the surrounding surface. Now, professionals generally can just scrape around the edges and pick up any drips they might have left on the court. And their patches will be pretty smooth. Most of you do-it-yourselfers doing this for the first time will probably need to rent a floor sander. And there are 3 different kinds. We'll look at those in a minute. You'll need to sand the court, and then you might want to walk over it with a scraper. You see, he's feathering those edges by scraping them down. But they're pretty close to court level when he starts. You have 3 choices in floor sanders. The first is a buffer floor sander, which is a little bit hard to get used to, but it does a great job. The second is the easiest to use, and that is it's kind of an orbital sander, hard to mess up, but doesn't do quite as good of a job. And the last one is very surgical. It's called a drum floor sander, and that's my favorite. Now, this is a video showing one of our guys using the buffer. You can see it really does kind of get around in a hurry, and it's a little bit unwieldy to get started. Once you get used to it, it's a very easy machine to use. I think the drum floor sander is the best of all of the sanders. It's productive, it's surgical, and it's easy to control. Watch him push the handle forward here. That actually set the belt down onto the surface so that it's sanding. And when you're backing up, you can't see it in this video, but he actually pulls the handle back and it's just rolling on casters. You're not touching the court with the sander at that point. With all of these sanders, you should use sandpaper no finer than 20 grit. After your patches are scraped, sanded, and blown off, it's a good practice to put what we call a skim coat of color over the patch before you apply your 2 coats over the entire court. This is a very simple, fast step that goes a long way towards hiding your patches. When the skim coat is dry, scrape around the entire area one more time. Once you've scraped all of your skim coat areas, it's time to blow and scrape the entire area you plan to surface. In this case, our professional is only planning to surface the inbounds. So he's not going to try to scrape and blow the entire court. He's just going to take care of the inbounds. And this technique of holding the blower in one hand and the scraper in the other really does come in handy, because you'll find all kinds of little things, bubble gum, bugs, things that stick to the court. The blower won't quite move, and you can just pop them loose with the scraper as you go. Now you'll notice he's starting at one baseline, and he's going to work his way back and forth parallel to the baseline. He'll go back and forth all the way to the other end of the court. And this brings us to the end of our instructional video on patching a tennis court. If you'd like to learn more about tennis court surfacing and repair, visit our website at thecourtstore.com. We have dozens of articles and videos to help you with your next tennis court project. Or call us anytime. We actually answer the phone for our do-it-yourselfers 7 days a week.